Drawing the red panda from Turning Red is easier than you think, and I'm going to show you exactly how you can do it, no matter your skill level. Hey wonderful people, it's Genevieve, and my goal here on this channel is to teach you all about illustration and design. So if you're new, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss any of the weekly videos, and so that you can join our wonderful creative community. And with that said, grab your drawing tools, and let's get started. And just a quick note before we start, in this video I am going to be painting in Procreate on my iPad Pro, but you can really follow along using any digital art software of your choice, and even pencil and paper would work, at least for the first part of the video, because this is going to be a character breakdown. And what I mean by that is that we're going to learn how to break down this character right here in the most basic shape possible, so you can learn to, one, draw it yourself, but then also just change the position of the character very easily. And with that said, we're going to start by creating a new canvas so that we have somewhere to draw. Now for reference, these are the dimensions of the canvas I will be using in this video. Since this is a demo, this is just the size of my iPad screen, but make sure you find dimensions that work for your own project requirements. Now if you're not exactly sure how to pick a canvas size, I have a video in which I teach you everything you need to know in order to make your decision, so I will link that in the description below. One more little quick note before we start: if you want to have a reference like I do here, you can go ahead in the wrench icon menu here at the top, selecting the canvas submenu, and then activate the reference toggle right here, which is going to let you import an image. So if you want to use my illustration as a reference, it will be linked in the description below, along with the color palette that we're going to use in the video. They're both totally free, so you can just download them by following the link in the description. So we're going to start, like I was saying, with the character breakdown. So we're going to break down this character in the most basic shape possible. So for that, we're going to go ahead and, well, I'm going to hide my example, but we're going to create a new layer, and we're going to rename it to Sketch. Now, if you're working with pencil and paper, obviously just, draw on your paper, but make sure you draw very, very lightly. Otherwise, if you're working digitally, go ahead and pick a nice neutral gray, not too dark, just kind of medium. And in this video, I'm always going to be suggesting a few different brush options. So if you're working with Procreate, you have a few options. Otherwise, if you're working with a different software, I'm also going to give you tips on how to find brushes that could work. So one of the brushes I'm going to suggest is going to be a free brush that comes with Procreate. It's going to allow you to follow along just fine. And then another option is going to be a brush from my Ultimate Illustration bundle. Now these brushes, again, they're not essential. You can follow along with whatever drawing tools you have. But if you do have Procreate, these brushes can help you save time and get more professional results, because they're very highly sensitive and they have a lot of really nice texture within them. So if you want to check it out, it will be linked in the description below as well. And there's always a special promo code for the YouTube people. That being said, once more, it's really not essential, especially for the character breakdown. You can really pick any brush that you know you're comfortable with at this stage. So in Procreate, that could be in the sketching panel, the HB pencil, or if you do have the bundle, you could pick in the texture part of the bundle, the sketching brush. So the first thing we're going to do is just map out the bottom and the top of the character. Now, if you're working digitally, just make sure you zoom out so you can actually see the edges of your canvas, and then map out roughly where you want your character to start and end. And now that we have the height of the character, it's going to be very easy to just map out the different proportions. So if we look at this red panda that Pixar created, you can tell that the head fits twice in the body. So what we're going to do here is we're going to divide this height in 3. So the top part is going to be the head, and then this bottom part is going to be for the body. Don't worry though, it doesn't need to be exactly precise. We just want to have rough guides. And we're also going to go ahead and divide the bottom part in 2. And with that, we're ready to start drawing the basic shapes of the character. And we're going to start with the head, which is just an oval, as you can see. So in the top section, just go ahead and roughly draw an oval. It doesn't need to be precise in any way. We're just mapping out the basic shapes. Now the body is very simple. You can see it's the same width as the head, so you can just go ahead and draw another oval, kind of like this. Now having that, we can just extend our little oval here straight down, which is going to help us map the legs. And then just add a little gap in the middle. We can also add another oval for the tail. Now this oval is going to start on this line right here and end on this one right here. So where the head connects with the body and where the body connects with the legs. Just like this. Again, it's okay if it's messy, don't worry, that's totally part of the process. We're going to clean this up in a few seconds. So at this point, we can go ahead and zoom in and start refining the head a little bit. Now, one of the main features of this character is that it has really nice big pointy ears, so you can go ahead and draw triangles on top of your character's head. And we're also going to refine the shape of the head because, as you can see, it's not quite as round at the bottom, it's a little bit more square. So we're just going to extend the bottom part of our oval to tweak the shape. Now there's a lot going on in the facial features, so I recommend just starting by drawing a slightly curved vertical line that is going to show the direction of the head, as well as a slightly curved horizontal line. Now this is what I usually call the plus sign, and this is really super helpful to help us place the facial features. So once you have your plus sign, you can zoom in once more, and we're going to start by just mapping out the nose area, which is going to connect with the top of the plus sign and is going to essentially be a rounded triangle. We're also going to draw the eyes, and for that you can use your horizontal middle line as a guide. You can also go ahead and sketch out the mouth, so just a very big, slightly curved oval like this. I know right now this looks absolutely crazy, but bear with me, we're going to clean it up. But first we're going to add little eyebrows at the top like this, a little bit of a nose. And for the arms, you might want to first go ahead and draw ovals on the body, which is going to be essentially the shoulder socket, and then draw the arms in two sections. So just two ovals, one for the top of the arm, and then another one for the bottom part of the arm. Doing the same thing on the other side, just like that. Now the beauty of breaking down a character like this in basic shapes is that you can use a reference to first study the character, break it down, understand the basic structure, and then go back in and move stuff around to have the character be in a different position. So let's say here, well, I'm using Procreate, but you could do that differently in different softwares, but I'm just going to show you an example. You could use the selection tool in Procreate, setting it to freehand and drawing a selection around one part of the body. Let's say I want to move the forearm. So just selecting the oval, that is the forearm, that's it. And then using the arrow tool to rotate it and maybe extend the arm instead. Now, if you're working with pencil and paper, obviously you cannot just go in with your selection tool and move stuff around, but breaking down the character like this is going to help you understand how it works, which means you can quickly just sketch everything on one piece of paper and then take another one and look at the shapes, look at the dimensions, the proportions of the shape, and just move them around that way. So feel free here to change the position of your character by just moving the different body parts, which are for now just basic shapes. And once you're happy with your structure, we're going to go ahead and actually clean it up to create an illustration. So if you're working digitally, go ahead and create a new layer above your sketch and rename it to line art. We're then going to go back to our sketch layer and lower the opacity of it so we can just barely see it. We want to be able to use it to trace, but we don't want it to be too distracting. Now I'm going to keep mine a little bit more opaque so you can see it well in the video, but make sure that you lower yours quite a lot until you can just barely see it. And if you're working with pencil and paper, this is the reason why I told you to press very, very gently first so that you only have very pale lines at this stage. And for the line art, you can go back and press hard. Now for the outlines, you have a few different options in terms of colors. You could go ahead and just draw black outlines or a very cartoonish look. I like to have slightly colored outlines. So if you want that, go ahead and pick a dark red, which if you have the color palette is going to be this one right here. Otherwise you can see it's just a pretty dark red that has a bit of orange to it. And in terms of brushes, once more, you have a few different options. You could go, if you're working in Procreate, in the sketching panel, picking the 6B pencil. If you're working in a different software, just pick a brush that has pencil in the name and you should be totally good to go. And if you do have my illustration bundle, go ahead and pick the outlines brush. Now at this stage, honestly, we've done the hardest work. All we have to do is go back and pick which line we're going to use. So it's just a question of tracing. So you can really experiment here. There's no right or wrong way to do it. I like to start with the head because this is probably the most important part of the character. So finding a place that I know I'm happy with, I think I'm happy with the front of the face here. So yeah, it's really just a question of tracing over what you have. Don't be afraid to experiment. Don't be afraid to go out of the structure and change a few things. Don't be afraid to undo and redo if you have a digital art software that allows you to do that. If you work with pencil and paper, don't be afraid to erase. That's totally okay. And really take all the time you need here to draw nice outlines. Oh, and I almost forgot, since this character is covered in fur, don't hesitate to have really fun, rough outlines with a bunch of little fur pieces poking out. It doesn't need to be super clean and smooth, so really have fun here and go a little bit crazy. And with that, it is time for the secret password. So if you've watched this far in the video, go ahead and leave a comment below with the words Red Panda. And if you're new on the channel, I know that might seem a bit strange, but it's a game that we play here in every single video. People seem to really like it, but honestly, it's much more than a game because it gives me a lot of insight into how to edit and pace my video better, so that's super important. You know, it's a win-win for everyone. So just leave a comment with the words Red Panda, and we're going to meet for the next step once we have the line art complete, which is going to be adding the base colors. Great, so once you're happy with your line art, you can go ahead and hide the sketch layer. We won't need it anymore, and this should be really encouraging because this looks so much better already. But if you do realize that there's something you don't like in your line art, this is the time to change it before we add the colors. So for example, I feel like the head of my character here is a little bit too close to the front, so I'm going to use again the selection tool, making sure it's set to freehand and drawing a selection around the head. With the arrow tool, I can then move it really quickly, just so that your character is a little bit better aligned. So make sure you're happy with your line art, and when you are, go ahead and create a new layer right below it and rename it to Colors. Now here on this layer, we're just going to be drawing the silhouette of the panda, so one solid color, and that color is actually just a lighter version of the color we used for the line art. So you can see in the color palette, it's right here. It's almost kind of like a burnt salmon color. And in terms of brush here, we just want to make sure you have something without any texture so we can create a nice clean silhouette. So in Procreate, you have a few options. Once more, you could pick in the airbrushing panel the hard brush, making sure that the opacity is up to 100% if you watch my watercolor videos. And if you're working in different software, it's really just a circle brush that doesn't have any texture to it. That's what you're looking for. If you do have the illustration bundle though, go ahead and pick the base round brush. So all you have to do here is outline your character so you can then fill it in and create the silhouette. So once you have your outline, you can just fill it in to create a silhouette. So that's a good start, but this character has a bunch of different color areas, so we're going to paint those now. And for that, you can go ahead and create a new layer above your color layer and rename it, to Extra Colors. Now, if you're working in Procreate, you can tap on this extra color layer and apply it as a clipping mask, which means everything we're going to paint on the extra color layer is going to stay within the silhouette that we have. So that's just helpful because we don't have to worry too much about staying within the lines, but that's not essential. Obviously, if you're working with a different software, you can just make sure that you stay within the shape of your character. So we have a few different colors to add here. We're going to start with a nice brown that is towards the bottom of the legs and a little bit on the tail. So in the color palette, it's going to be this color right here. Otherwise, you can see it's just a less saturated version of the red that you had first. So a bit darker and a bit more gray. And here we want to build some texture. So we're going to pick a brush that has a lot of really nice grit to it. If you're not working in Procreate, just try to find a brush that has the word charcoal in the name, and that should work really, really well. If you're working in Procreate, once more, you have a few options. You could go in the charcoals panel and picking either the willow charcoal or the carbon stick. I probably would recommend the willow charcoal, honestly. But if you do have the illustration bundle, go ahead and pick in the texture panel once more the basic texture brush. So this brown, we're just going to brush it over the bottom part of the legs very quickly. So mostly the feet, but it's, creeping up a little bit up to the hips. We're also going to brush it over the arms, mostly the hands and the forearm. and we're going to brush it over the entire tail. Now the next color we're going to add is a nice orange for the tail. So in the color palette, it is this one right here. Otherwise, you can see it's just a pale, slightly gray, nice yellow orange. Now this color, we're going to use it to add the stripes on the tail. So you can just draw one at the very top. And then you're going to add 3 more. So just one here, and one here. Now one color that is going to make a big difference is all this kind of creamy white on the face. So in the color palette, it is this one right here. Otherwise, you can see it's just a much lighter version of the orange we just used. And here we're going to zoom in on the face so we can be a little bit more precise. And we're going to start with this kind of nose area. We're going to entirely fill it in. We're going to fill in these kind of eyebrows, the ears, and we're also going to add the cream color on the cheeks, and it's going to line up with the eyes, so it's going to stop essentially at this height. Now, you can see I haven't touched the facial features yet, and there's a reason for that. I like to draw all the facial features on a bunch of separate layers so you can easily move them around as needed, because they're really super important for the piece, so you want to make sure you have total control over them. You could draw them all on one layer, but otherwise, if you want to do like me, go ahead and create a new layer above the extra color layer below the line art and rename it to eyes. Now for the eyes, we're going to pick a nice, almost white, kind of gray, beige color, so just a lighter version of what we used before. And then you can fill in the eyes. Now you could go ahead and create a new layer above the eyes. I know it might seem a little bit too much, but again, I like to keep everything separate so it's easy to move around. And this layer, you're going to rename it to iris. So for the iris, we're going to go with a really nice dark brown, almost black, but not quite, with a little bit of red in it. And the color palette is going to be this one. And we're going to go back to the brush we used for the line art. So that could be the 6B pencil if you're working with Procreate free brushes. Otherwise, if you have my illustration bundle, it's going to be the outlines brush. And you're going to draw, well, the iris. So a circle, a little bit like this. And I like to manually fill them in so I have a little bit more texture, but you could just drop the color on it if you want. And since they're a separate layer, it's really easy to go back and use the selection tool and selecting one of them, for example. And then with the arrow tool, just kind of move it around so it's really, exactly where you want it to be. And once you're happy with them, you're going to go back to the orange we used on the tail, so this one right here in the palette. And you're going to add a bit of that color as a C-curve on the bottom of the iris. You're then going to go back to the color you used for the eyeball, so almost white, but not quite, and draw a circle at the top of the iris, which should really make your character come to life. Now, if you want at this stage, you can go ahead and merge the 2 layers once you're happy with the positioning of everything. If you're working in Procreate, to merge layers, all you have to do is squish them with 2 fingers, and that's it. And then we're going to do the same thing with the mouth. So just creating a new layer. It could be above or below the eyes, it doesn't matter. Just make sure it's above extra color and rename it to mouth. So the mouth, we're going to go back to the really dark brown red color we used for the iris. And we're just going to first fill in the mouth shape. So once you have your mouth shape, we can go back and create a new layer, renaming this one to tongue. And picking a nice pink. It doesn't have to be any specific pink, just something you like. And then you can go ahead and draw a nice tongue. Now our character is really missing some teeth right now. It looks absolutely crazy. So just go ahead and create a new layer. Once more, rename it to teeth. And we're going to go back to the almost white but not quite that we used for the eyes. And here I recommend you start with the big teeth that are on either side of the nose area. So just mapping those out first. Your character should look absolutely insane right now. And then you're going to have a few smaller ones on either side. And finally, a few that slightly poke out from under the nose. Once more, if you want at this stage, once you're happy with the positioning of everything, you can merge all of those layers together to have just one big mouth layer. And we're also going to draw the nose, so just creating a new layer and renaming it to nose, and going back to the dark color we used for the mouth and the pupil, and then just filling in the nose like this. Great, so at this stage, when we have the basic colors, you're going to be able to see your character a little bit better, and you might notice some parts of him that you don't necessarily like. So you always have the option to go back and tweak a few things. For example, I don't like the positioning of this eye, so I'm just going to go back and select the eye layer, of course, and the line art as well, so just swapping it towards the right. And then back with the selection tool to slightly move it in. So that's the beauty, again, of drawing on separate layers. It's just easier to change things as you go. So take all the time you need here to refine your character, and then we're going to move on to shading. Now before we start shading, we might want to go back and recolor the line art just so it blends a little bit better. And if you're working in Procreate, there's a really cool trick that you can use here, which is swiping your line art layer with 2 fingers towards the right to activate Alpha Lock. You can also manually activate it in the menu. And what that does is now everything we draw on this line art layer is going to stay within the line art that was already there. So that's going to allow you to really quickly color over. Otherwise, if you're working in a different software, you can just, draw over and you're going to be fine. And what I like to do, like I was telling you earlier in the video, is having darker version of the different colors in my character. So instead of having just one color, I'm going to go back and, for example, pick a darker version of the screen and then outline that section with that color. So if you have my color palette, the darker version of your base color is going to be always on the right of it. So what that means is, for example, this is the color we use for the ears. If you pick on the right, that's going to be the color you use for the outline. Otherwise, if you're picking your own colors, you could just go back and, for example, color pick here and just make the color darker. Essentially, that's what I did. And here you can really use any brush to do this step. You just want to make sure it's big enough so you can fill in big sections, and then you can just brush over your lines to recolor them. Now obviously you don't have to do this step if you want to have one color for your outlines. That's totally okay as well, but that's a little detail that I feel can make your piece feel a little bit more professional. So I encourage you to try it if you've never done it before. So just doing the cream, then going back to the orange color, making it darker for the tail, outlining the tail, and picking a darker version of the brown we use for the legs and the arms, and then going back over those sections. You might also go back with this dark brown and go over the mouth and the eyes. So we've done the hard work now. Our character is mapped out, but it looks super boring and flat, so we're going to add a few shadows and highlights to really bring it to life. And before that, we might want to just clean our file a little bit. So every layer that you have, except for the line art, you're going to apply it as a clipping mask on the base color. Now, if you don't have clipping mask in your software, that's totally okay. Once more, you just need to be a little bit more careful about where you place your shadows. But if you do have clipping mask, yeah, apply everything from the extra colors to the eyes as a clipping mask on your base color. And then create a new layer and rename it to shadows. And this shadow layer is also going to be applied as a clipping mask so it stays within the base silhouette. And for the shadows, you could go ahead and, for example, pick this red here, make it darker and paint your shadows that way. But if you're working in a digital art software, you might want to instead use blending modes. So in Procreate, you just tap on the little N right here, and we're going to select a blending mode called Linear Burn. and we're going to lower the opacity of 50%. So now what that does, we're going to be able to just pick one color and then paint all the shadows with that color, and because we have a blending mode, the color is going to adapt to whatever is underneath it, so it's going to save a whole lot of time and it's going to look really good. Now the color you're going to use here is totally up to you, but one thing I would recommend is to avoid using a neutral gray because that's going to make your shadows look really muddy. So something that has a little bit of a tint to it is great. I like to go with a grayish purple because that makes the shadow look a little bit cooler. It's just really nice, but again, it's a question of personal preference. And here we're not necessarily going with super realistic shadows, we're mostly going to use the shadows to separate the different body parts of the character. So for example here, we can see that the head and the body look like they're just the same. So we're going to go back to the brush we used to add the extra colors. So in Procreate, once more, that could be in the charcoal panel, the willow charcoal, or the carbon stick if you're working with a different software, again, just something that has charcoal in the name. But if you have the illustration bundle, that would be, where is it? There, the basic texture. So what we're going to do here is just add a shadow below the head so that it gets separated from the body. We're going to do the same with the arms, so just separating them from the body real quickly. We're also going to do it on the bottom part of the tail where it connects with the back. Doing it on this leg right here, mostly focusing on the left part, so kind of like that. And just because this area otherwise looks really kind of flat, we're also going to add a little bit of a shadow on this side of the back and the leg. Kind of like that. We're also going to add shadows in the ears. Maybe a little bit on the tongue as well. And we might also use the shadow to shape the cheeks as well. You can see in my example, it might be a little bit small, but there's a little bit of shadow that connects the eye with this cream area right here. So something very soft like this. Now you could totally just not do that one if you don't feel comfortable, but otherwise it's pretty simple. Again, it just connects the eye with the cream shape. Okay, so that's much better already. I don't know about you, but this is really encouraging. All we have left to do before adding the background is adding the highlights, and the highlights are going to make even more of a difference. So for that, go ahead and create a new layer, rename it to Lights, and apply it as a clipping mask once more so it stays within the base color. And here we're going to use a different blending mode. This one is called Add. Now Add is very strong, so for now go ahead and lower the opacity, probably around 30%. But once we painted the lights, we're going to go back and tweak the opacity of both the shadows and the light. And similarly to what we did for the shadows here, you're just going to pick one color for your light. And I personally like to paint my light with a really bright yellow, so it looks like it's the sun. In the color palette, it's going to be this one right here, but otherwise just, as you can see, a super bright yellowish color. And for my lights, I personally use a technique that I call outlining your outlines. So instead of really drawing the volumes with the lights, I just go back in and pick one light source. So in our case, if we look at the shadows, they're mostly on this side, which means the light would be here. And then every body part, the part that is facing the light source, I'm just going to go back in and outline the outline with light. So this direction, I'm just going to add a light right here. So you can see this is really simple, but this is really going to make your character pop. So you can just go over and outline your outlines that are facing the light source. And you can also use this technique to just add a bit more contrast between two body parts that otherwise look like they're blending together. For example, here, if you look at the arm, it just looks like it's blending with the back. So even if it's not facing the light source, you might want to go ahead and add a little bit of a line, making sure it's a bit thinner than the main ones, but that just helps making the piece easier to read overall. Now you could stop here, or you could make your brush really big and very lightly paint over this part of the body, just so that our character is not quite as flat. So nothing fancy here, but you can see it makes a big difference, and you can do that on top of the head as well. And you're probably noticing that we're still missing the whiskers, and the reason for that is that they're white, so we just need to change the background color first. So to make a character pop here, we're going to go with a really dark background. So if you're working in Procreate, you can just select your background color here. And if you're working with the color palette, it's going to be this grayish brown right here. Otherwise, you can see it's just something super dark and gray. Now this is pretty good, but I recommend adding a few little detail elements on your background to really bring your piece to the next level. One of those is some sort of gradient. So for that, go ahead and create a new layer below your character, but above your background, of course, and rename this one to Gradient. You're then going to pick a darker version of your background color. So again, it was this one right here in the palette, and the darker version is really hard to see in the video, but it's right under it. And with whichever brush you have, you're just going to go ahead and draw a curve like this, and then fill it in so you have a section. Now you could go ahead and manually blend that in if you want. Or if you're working in Procreate or Photoshop, honestly, a lot of digital art software have that feature. You can use the smudge tool, which is usually a little finger icon like this. And if you're working in Procreate, you might want to set it to the sucker brush in the painting panel, otherwise it really doesn't matter much. But you can then use this brush, play with the size, see what works for you, to blend in the bottom section and create a gradient. And it really doesn't need to be a perfect gradient, just kind of blending it in a little bit more. Now you might also want to add a shadow below your character, so for that you can just create a new layer above the gradient. Rename this layer to Ground Shadow. And once more, we're going to use the blending mode Linear Burn, lowering the opacity around 50%. And picking the color we used for the shadows on our character. It doesn't need to be exactly the same one. If you don't have it in your history or something, just roughly go with it and that's fine. And then just painting a little bit of a shadow there. Doesn't need to be precise, but that makes a big difference. Now it looks like our character is actually standing on something. And now that we have the shadows and the lights all painted, you can go back and play with the opacity of your ground shadow layer, your shadow layer, and your lights until you're happy with the different contrast in your piece. So you might lower the shadow if you feel like it's too much, or make it more if you want the light to be very dramatic. I think I'm going to keep mine around 40%, and I'm going to keep the lights as they were, I'm pretty sure. Yeah, 30 is good. And the very last little thing we have to do is add some little whiskers. So above everything, above the line art, just creating a new layer, renaming it to Whiskers. Picking the white but not quite color, going back to the brush you use for your line art, so either the 6B pencil or the outline brush if you're working in Procreate. And just adding some little wiggly whiskers on the side of the face. And in a lot of promotional material for the Pixar movie, you see the red panda and there's the girl right in front of it. So if you want to create a cartoon version of yourself to put in front of your red panda, I have a few videos in which I'm going to teach you exactly how to do it step by step in this playlist right here. But before you check it out, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of the weekly videos I post every Tuesday and Saturday. Then click on the link right here and I'll meet you there.